Welcome to the Tuva project. I'm Aaron, and today we're going to learn about the Medallion data architecture and how Tuva thinks about it for healthcare analytics. So this is kind of the canonical Medallion data architecture, and pretty much everyone who does data warehousing follows a Medallion data architecture of some kind. People write blog posts and they talk about it as if it's like this really novel thing, and it's kind of this thing you have to convince people to do, but it's actually just it's like the only way to actually do data warehousing in a smart way. Now there can be different forms of it. Like this is kind of the canonical example, and it has three layers, and I'll walk through those layers and kind of what happens in each layer. But other versions of it, you might work somewhere and they might have five layers or something like that, and that's totally fine. You can, but basically the why would you adopt a Medallion data architecture? Really, what it does is it gives your team a common way to organize data cleaning and enrichment across different layers so that everybody in your organization, on your data team, consumers of data, so that everybody's on the same page of like, hey, where does cleaning happen? What sort of cleaning and enrichment happens at which layer? And so just to kind of go through each of the layers, the bronze layer, this is where all the raw data lands, and there's zero transformation that happens, right? So you get files, you connect to source database systems, whatever. You're just loading this data directly into the data warehouse, untransformed. And really the main benefit here of loading all that data untransformed is you can always refer back to the raw data. So if something gets screwed up downstream, you can always go back to the raw data. So this is like a really important concept. You want to load all the raw data basically untransformed. And so that's the bronze layer. The silver layer is really where minimal data normalization happens. And so what do I mean by minimal? Really, this boils down to like standardizing the data model and standardizing really atomic level vocabulary. And by atomic level vocabulary, I mean like kind of the values that we allow within fields that are coming in the raw data. So let's go through both examples of both of these. So here's a data model, a simple data model normalization example. Let's say we've got two data sources coming in, and in one data source, the field for patient for the gender of the patient, the biological gender or sex of the patient is called patient underscore gender. In the other data source, that same piece of information is called member underscore sex. We'll normalize both those fields into a common field in a common table, and we'll call that field sex. And so we'll do that mapping to normalize the data model. Here's a simple vocab example, kind of sticking with the same concept. For the field that was patient underscore gender, let's say the values that were in that field in the source data were a capital M for male and a capital F for female. And for the other data source where sex was called member sex, let's say the values are 0, 1. So it's just a flag where 0 represents male, 1 represents female. What we're going to do is we're going to normalize those values to male and female. Okay, so this is like really simple example, right? But we're going to do that not just for this field and for the values within this field, but we're going to do it for kind of all the values within the data model, or most of the values within the data model in the silver layer. And really the main benefit then of the silver layer is now we have a standardized layer that we can go and build simple reporting off of and more advanced data marts on top of. So now let's talk about the gold layer and what really happens within the gold layer. This is where enrichment happens, okay? And so this is where we are going to, by enrichment, we really mean defining higher level concepts, right? So an example of a higher level concept is, how do I define patients that have type 2 diabetes, right? So I'm going to use the data in the normalized layer. For example, I might use ICD-10 codes in the normalized layer to build this concept. But because gold is built on silver, we can write our code. We only have to write this concept, code to code, the SQL or the code that we'll use to define this concept, we only have to write it once because the data has already been normalized. So sometimes, for example, you might see ICD-10 codes come in without periods, with periods, without periods. And so if you were going to use those ICD-10 codes to define type 2 diabetes, you'd have to do that cleaning first. Otherwise, you'd have to define the concept two completely different ways. So again, because gold is built on silver, that cleaning has already been done. We only have to write that code once. And so then as a consequence, pretty much all the analytics that you're really going to do, except for very simple analytics, are going to run off of gold. And this includes dashboards, it includes reports, it includes, other ad hoc analyses like, building data science models or just answering, kind of ad hoc data analyses. And so that's kind of like the kind of simple explanation of what a medallion architecture is, what are the benefits of a medallion architecture, but pretty much everybody follows that. Now, how does Tuva apply the medallion architecture? And I'm to walk through this, I'm not going to go through the entire Tuva project pipeline in detail because we would just get lost in the weeds, but I'm going to keep it pretty high level here. And I'm just going to highlight, here's where the medallion architecture ends up in Tuva. So first, for bronze, most organizations that use Tuva have multiple healthcare data sources, multiple claims data sources, EHR data. So in this example, you can see there's claims data coming in from Blue Cross Blue Shield, from Aetna, from CMS. There's EHR data from Athena Health. Maybe you're getting fire data from somebody like Metroport. And so that's all the bronze data. And so again, we're going to load all of that data just as raw into the data warehouse. With Tuva, the next step is, and this is really where the normalization to the silver layer begins. It's not just you're not with Tuva, you're not just directly mapping bronze data all the way to silver. But what we do is we map that data to what we call the Tuva input layer. And the Tuva input layer is really a well kind of specified set of data tables. You can see the data dictionary for the input layer is on the tuvaproject.com here, and you can see all those tables and go through mapping, more detailed kind of mapping instructions for how we think about mapping to it. But once these different data sources have been mapped to the Tuva input layer, you can run the rest of the Tuva project with a single command. And so what's going to happen after that, pretty much the first thing after that is all the different data quality pipeline tests. I think there's over 1,000 data quality pipeline tests. A lot of those run, the vast majority of those run immediately after the Tuva input layer. And that's just going to make sure that you did that mapping correctly, right? It's going to make sure you're not missing columns. It's going to make sure the values that we expect in different fields are there, et cetera. Then the next step is really a data mart that we call claims pre-processing. And this is the only data mart that really runs ahead of the core data model. All the other data marts are down, kind of building higher level concepts in gold. But claims are weird, and they don't have fundamental concepts like encounters or visits in them. And so we run claims pre-processing kind of does a few things. It normalizes some of the atomic level claims data. So it'll add leading zeros to like revenue codes or bill type codes. It'll remove decimal points from ICD-10 codes, just kind of do basic cleaning. Then it'll tag all the claims with a service category, following the service category grouper. Then it'll group those claims into encounters. And we use the word encounter and visit interchangeably. The encounter is really a fundamental concept that we want in the silver layer. So that's a big reason we run claims pre-processing before the core data model, before the silver layer. And then finally, a member months kind of algorithm will run to produce member months. But all that happens ahead of silver. or the ahead of the core data model. And the core data model is really the silver layer from a Medallion architecture standpoint in the Tuva project. And then beyond that, all the data marts run. And so really that is the gold layer of the project. And that includes, data marts for specific things like readmissions, hospital readmissions and doing readmissions analytics, or CMS, HCC, risk scores and recapture rates. But it also includes new things like the semantic layer that we just released, which kind of organize information across the different data marts into a dimensional model, sort of a star schema model that's it's easy to build dashboards on. And so that's a quick tutorial kind of through Medallion architecture in general and how we think about it at Tuva.